Are there, if you look at Germany, Germany kind of had the same history as America. They had a crash there in the Black Forest, a UFO crash there in the Black Forest. I do believe that Hitler recovered that and brought that back in. If you take a look at where Germany was as far as the technology-wise, I mean, they had already come out with guided missile systems. They had two different types. They had the V1 and the V2 rockets. The U.S. couldn't. We were still trying to get rockets off the ground.
I just got done watching a long video on Operation Paperclip.
Well, there you go. There you go. And they're dealing with this very subject. They came up with a flying wing. They had that way before us. We could launch. Goddard was able to launch a rocket straight up. The Germans were sending these buzz bombs over Britain and just bombing the shit out of them. So at the end of the day, people started to kind of look at this. Well, wait a minute. Where are the Germans coming from? And it's odd, too. Where did Hitler come up with blonde hair, blue-eyed people? That he wanted everybody else to have this look. If you look at the tall whites, what they're called, they have blonde hair, blue eyes, very Nordic looking, and they're kind of being pushed in the same category. I try to figure out why Hitler didn't have blonde hair, blue eyes. He wasn't from a blonde hair, blue-eyed family.
No.
You know what I'm saying? So where did that come from? Where did the flying wing come from? We have that technology today. When we got Werner von Braun here was a major in the Nazi military. Once we brought him back here, 11 years later, we went to the moon.
Right.
So he was able to
allegedly
go to the moon. Like I say, well, that's a whole other conversation. So. But it's watching what he said was able to do. Now, one of the things he brought to the table were gyros. The U.S. never used gyros before. We didn't have them on any of our vehicles. And this was one of the things that allowed this vehicle to turn. So as they launched it off, it could actually, make those corrections so that it flew over Britain. And the subject matter was, or the basic function of the rocket was run out of gas. And then it would, obviously fly into the city somewhere and usually kill a mass amount of civilians.
Yeah. When you get into the whole, I think part of the crazy thing about the technology that we got from the Germans is like specifically there was one ship, I forget what it was called. I think it was called like the One Wing, right? It looked exactly like the stealth bomber.
Absolutely.
It was the same exact thing.
And, when they were so far ahead, there's no tail on this thing. They were so far ahead of what everybody else was doing across the board, which I can only believe was due to alien technology. Now, from what I understand now, the Chinese have been extremely quiet. Matter of fact, they just finally released that they actually have pyramids in China, and they're starting to study. Yes, they did. So, China had never let anything like that out.
How long ago did this come out?
Probably 5 months ago, 6 months ago.
Huh.
And it was the first time that China had really released any information with regards to their history, and it was guarded information as well. So you start to see, well, wait a minute. If you had pyramids in China, they had pyramids in Egypt, they had pyramids in South America, yet these organizations or these groups of people had no way of communicating with one another. It obviously tells you there's something bigger going on. Now, were the pyramids used for power consumption? Were they used as a burial mound? They're still trying to figure that out. I think there's a large percentage of the scientific community now that believe that these were some sort of either for communications purposes or power purposes.
The weird thing about the pyramids too is like building them and the connection with sound. And like I was telling you, I was watching this thing about this whole thing about sound and how everything is tied into sound, and sound is tied into the creation of everything. And what was that place again called in Florida where the guy had these giant structures in South Florida? It was called like Coral Castle.
The Coral Castle. Coral Castle.
And Coral Castle is similar to some of like the big monoliths around the world. Like, how did this thing was apparently built a long time ago.
I want to say it was in the 30s.
In the 30s.
He was initially on the east coast of Florida. This was a real small guy. He was a German guy from Europe, and had built the original Coral Castle. And like I say, I want to say over by probably Melbourne, somewhere in that area. And he, during the process of this, had a crush on a 16-year-old girl, which back in the day obviously was not going to be tolerated. And I think the city where he initially built this turned out against him, and they didn't like him now, and they felt him as a threat. So he ended up having to move the Coral Castle to Homestead, Florida. And in dealing with the people who were hauling these stones, now this guy weighed 135 pounds. He didn't have any other workers that worked with him. He did this all on his own. He would cut chunks of coral out of the ground that were 3, 4, 5 tons, and used when you look at the picture, one of the pictures they show is it's a tripod. It's set up over this huge, massive rock.
Oh, this is it.
Oh, there you go. So as they set it up over this rock, the one interesting thing is, he said that it's still in place. So they're cutting it out of the ground, and the guy who was showing you the picture said, I know you're looking at this going like, oh, this is how he moved those, but the problem is, how did he get the rope around underneath this 2-ton piece of block that he was trying to pull up?
Yeah,
So-
that's pretty wild. This was apparently this is allegedly built in the 30s, you said?
I believe so. I believe it was in the 30s, late 30s. So if you look to the right over there, that right there, that centerpiece. Now this is what really kind of got more attention, because that centerpiece, the bearings had eventually worn out. They had to take that thing apart.
Oh, that thing spins?
Spins. It actually spins around.
Holy shit.
Dude, you can just move it with your hand. So what they did was they had to bring in a special truck to lift the stone off the top so that they could get to the bearings on both the bottom and the top of that stone. And he goes, we almost couldn't do it because the stone was so heavy and so big we didn't have any equipment that could pick it up. So how did this guy move this here, place it in that location? And this individual that did this claimed that he knew the way that the Egyptians were using some sort of magnetism to move these rocks. And one of the guys was actually moving it, was a truck driver. He said, I would leave my truck there overnight and come back the next morning and the stone would already be loaded on the truck. He goes, I don't know how he got it on there. It wasn't like he had a forklift. He goes, so I would just pick it up, drive it to Homestead, drop the trailer, and then he would do whatever he does with it. So he actually showed a device. I saw one here a couple of weeks back where they actually had a device that he said was creating this magnetism. And this is how, he said that he believed this is how the Egyptians were moving all the stuff through magnetism.
Is that the guy right there?
That's him right there. That's him right there.
The modern day Stonehenge of Florida.
I mean, it's amazing, dude, when you start to look at it and think of what did this guy do and how could he have possibly moved these? Look how little he is.
Yeah. Wild.
But again, it's just one of those things where it makes you scratch your head and go, well, again, I wish he could have leveled with us and said, hey, this is how I'm actually doing this, because it would have taken a lot of the guesswork out of it. But he had to have some sort of means to move all these rocks. They're massive. I'd highly recommend too, if you ever get a chance to go down to Homestead, since we're here in Florida, check it out. It's really amazing.